Did you ever wonder what it would be like if your worst nightmare walked among us? Meet Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker. In the annals of American crime history, few names evoke as much dread and terror as that of Richard Ramirez, a man whose very existence seemed to be a chilling embodiment of our darkest fears. Known by the moniker the Night Stalker, Ramirez's name became synonymous with the very essence of evil. Born in El Paso, Texas in the early 1960s, Ramirez was the youngest of 5 children in a Mexican-American family. His early life was marred by a series of traumatic experiences, from witnessing his cousin commit a gruesome act of violence to suffering repeated head injuries that resulted in epileptic fits. These incidents, some argue, may have sown the seeds of the macabre path he would later tread. His adolescence was no less troubled. A budding interest in Satanism coupled with a growing dependence on drugs set him apart from his peers. Yet no one could have predicted the horror that was to come. As he grew into adulthood, the darkness inside him began to manifest in terrifying ways. His crimes, ranging from burglary to the most heinous acts of violence, sent shockwaves through the nation. His modus operandi was as unpredictable as it was brutal, earning him the chilling moniker the Night Stalker. He seemed to revel in the terror he incited, leaving behind a trail of fear and devastation that would haunt the collective memory for decades to come. In the summer of 1985, the city of Los Angeles lived in fear. The Night Stalker was on the prowl and no one was safe, yet few could have imagined the true extent of his malevolent deeds or the depth of his depravity. But it was the dark path that Ramirez chose that would ultimately make him one of America's most notorious criminals. As the sun set, a shadow would creep into the homes of the unsuspecting, marking the beginning of a reign of terror. The first known crimes committed by Richard Ramirez, the man who would soon be feared as the Night Stalker, began in the mid-80s. His horrifying modus operandi would soon become the stuff of nightmares. Ramirez was not a typical criminal. He was a predator who would invade homes under the cloak of darkness. His first victims were often unsuspecting, their homes transformed into scenes of horror. He would break in, often through an open window or an unlocked door. Once inside, Ramirez would unleash a terrifying ordeal upon his victims. He was not driven by theft, although he often took valuables. His primary motivation was the thrill of power and control. He would assault his victims, inflicting physical and psychological trauma. His heinous acts extended to murder, with a cold-bloodedness that sent chills down the spine of every resident in the city. Ramirez's crimes were not limited to a specific demographic. He targeted men, women, and even the elderly, proving that anyone could fall prey to the Night Stalker. His indiscriminate choice of victims only added to the growing fear and panic in the city. His methods were brutal, leaving a horrifying aftermath in his wake. Yet despite the terror he inflicted, Ramirez remained elusive. He would slip away as silently as he came, leaving behind a trail of terror. With each passing night, the city's fear grew. Sleep became elusive, and every noise in the dark became a potential threat. As the reign of terror continued, so did the city's determination to catch the monster lurking in their midst. Yet, the Night Stalker remained a step ahead, his identity a mystery, his crimes a chilling reminder of the darkness that lay just beyond the safety of their homes. With each passing night, the city's fear grew, as the Night Stalker remained elusive, leaving behind a trail of terror. In a city held hostage by fear, the hunt for the Night Stalker became a race against time. With a sense of urgency, law enforcement agencies pooled their resources together, determined to end the reign of terror that had gripped Los Angeles. Detectives pieced together a chilling portrait of a predator using the scant evidence left behind at the crime scenes. Shoe prints, fingerprints, and even a car description began to form a coherent picture of a man who was as elusive as he was dangerous. Investigators found themselves facing a daunting challenge. The Night Stalker didn't fit the usual profile of a serial killer. His victims ranged in age, race, and socioeconomic status, making it difficult to predict his next move. He struck without a discernible pattern, leaving the city on edge. The Night Stalker left a trail of breadcrumbs, taunting the authorities with his blatant disregard for being caught. He left behind avia shoe prints at multiple crime scenes, a crucial piece of evidence that would eventually lead the police to him. But despite their best efforts, the police found themselves always one step behind. The Night Stalker was cunning, often changing his modus operandi, disguising his physical appearance and even his vehicle to throw investigators off his trail. Law enforcement agencies, not to be outdone, ramped up their efforts. They established a dedicated task force, pooling resources and manpower to bring the Night Stalker to justice. They held press conferences, urging the public to be vigilant and report any suspicious activity. This was a city under siege, a city desperate for respite. The police were under immense pressure to catch the Night Stalker, and the public was looking to them for reassurances. The hunt was on. The city was in a state of high alert. The feeling of dread was palpable. But as the net began to close in, Ramirez remained a step ahead, leaving the city in a state of constant fear. The chase was not over. The Night Stalker was still out there, and the city held its breath, waiting for the nightmare to end. When the hunter becomes the hunted, the end of the Night Stalker's reign was finally in sight. In the summer of 1985, the city of Los Angeles was gripped by fear, but it was also united in determination. The community was not about to stand by while their city was being terrorized. And so, the public played an instrumental role in bringing Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, to justice. The turning point arrived on August 30th, 1985, when Ramirez's face was plastered on every newspaper, every television screen across the state, following the release of a mugshot from a previous arrest for car theft. Unaware that he had been publicly identified as the prime suspect, Ramirez took a bus to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother. Upon his return to Los Angeles, Ramirez was met with a city that knew his face all too well. The moment he stepped into a convenience store in East Los Angeles, his image, staring back at him from the front page of a newspaper, sent him into a panicked flight. His dash for freedom, however, was short-lived. Ramirez attempted to carjack a woman, but was chased away by bystanders. He ran through the streets, hopping fences and darting through backyards, but the citizens of East LA were on his tail. A group of residents, led by a man named Manuel de la Torre, pursued Ramirez, eventually cornering him until the police arrived. The Night Stalker's reign of terror had been brought to an end, not by a seasoned detective or an elite squad, but by ordinary citizens who had decided to take a stand. The public had played a pivotal role in his capture, turning the tide in a summer of fear. In the wake of his arrest, the city was awash with a sense of relief and triumph. The collective efforts of a community had prevailed over the darkness that had once consumed their nights. Finally, the city breathed a sigh of relief, as the Night Stalker was no longer free to terrorize the night. Even behind bars, the Night Stalker left a chilling legacy that continues to haunt us. Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, was finally behind bars, but the terror he inflicted was far from over. Once captured, the legal proceedings that followed were nothing short of a spectacle. The trial, which began in 1989, lasted over a year, making it one of the longest and most expensive in California's history. Ramirez, with his devil-may-care attitude and pentagram symbol, became a perverse figure of fascination. He reveled in the media attention, often appearing in court with a smirk on his face, adding to the macabre theater of his trial. But let's not forget the real impact of Ramirez's reign of terror: the victims. The Night Stalker's crimes left an indelible scar on those who survived, and the families of those who didn't. They had to endure not only the horrific events themselves, but also the subsequent trial, a constant reminder of the trauma they had experienced. Many of them, even decades later, still bear the psychological wounds inflicted by the Night Stalker. Ramirez's legacy goes beyond his victims, though. His crimes sent shockwaves through society, changing the way we think about safety in our own homes. His random pattern of attacks shattered the illusion of safety that many people felt in their own neighborhoods. Even today, his name invokes a sense of fear and serves as a reminder that evil can strike anywhere, anytime. Finally, Ramirez's story has had a profound impact on popular culture. His infamous moniker, the Night Stalker, his gruesome crimes, and his audacious court appearances have inspired countless books, documentaries, and even television series. His story serves as a grim tale that continues to captivate audiences worldwide. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most ordinary of places.